I'm Tony, and welcome to another edition of Foundation Paper Piecing. The block that we're going to work on today is the lightning block. If you have not yet purchased this pattern, it is only $2 on my website. The link is down below. And then I'm going to go through step by step on this video of how to put this together, some tips, some tricks, some things to keep an eye out for, and of course, how to resize the block. This is going to finish at a 6-inch finished block, but if you want it bigger or smaller, I'm going to show you how you can do that. So let's get started and let's start sewing. The first thing we want to do is make sure the size of our block is correct. So if you're making it this exact same size and you're not resizing anything, then you want to measure this 1-inch block right here. So we're going to measure the 1-inch block, and in my case it is 1 inch. So this is going to finish off at a 6-inch finished block. Now let's say if you want to have different sizes, we're going to use percentages. So let's say if I want to have it at a 3-inch block, well, 3 inches is 50% of 6 inches. So I'm going to lower this size on my printer by 50%. And then this is going to be 50% smaller, which is going to be a 1/2 inch. So whenever you're doing math, what you want to do is figure out your percentages. Well, how big do you want it? If you want a 12-inch block, well, that means it has to be double the size. So you want to double and make it 200% whenever you're increasing your size. If you don't know how to do the math of exactly how big or how small to print it at for the percentage or how much this block should be, go ahead and just put a message down below and I'll do the math for you and I'll let you know and I can tell you. So for today, we're going to assume that we're going to make a 6-inch finished block, and let's go ahead and do it. So then after we do that, we want to go ahead and cut out this paper. So this is exactly the size that we want to be. So we're going to cut out our pieces of paper, not on the dotted lines, around the dotted lines. Now this one's a little bit different than some of my other foundation paper pieced patterns. You notice in the corners it's got little black marks on some of them. That is for lining it up because this one is on an angle. We want to make sure that we line them up correctly. So let's go ahead and cut this out. And then we're going to cut out our fabrics. Now, for the first one, I made a black and gold lightning bolt. For this one, I'm going to make a red and gold lightning bolt, reminiscent of a superhero. So I'm going to use a red background with a gold lightning bolt. Oops, there we are. We've got that. Let's set that aside. So what I've done on my pattern is I've said I've got gold and red to remind me that those are the pieces I'm going to cut out. So now I've got my paper patterns. I'm going to take these. Now remember, the paper pattern is opposite than this. So in this case, this A4 is the A4 right there. So our paper is the opposite because it's going to go like that. Okay? So I'm going to set that aside, and now let's go ahead and cut them out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out my gold and my red fabric. Feel free to use scraps for these. It is a very scrap-friendly project. And then after I cut all of these out, I will come back from speeding up the video, and we'll start assembling. After you have all your fabrics cut out, the next step is to put the fabrics onto your papers and sew, just like foundation paper piecing. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to work on all 3 of these at the same time. We're going to start on the one and also work on these others as well. I'm going to skip through some of the instructions because it's a little bit more efficient, and then I can do all the sewing at the same time. So we'll start with the A unit. Now, for some reason, this is the second pattern I ever made, so I switched these two. So instead of starting with A1, we're starting with A2. So our A2 block is our 5.5 by 2 inch red. So that should be this one right here. And I've got that just like that. So we're going to take our piece, we're going to lay it down, and I'm putting this wrong side to wrong side. All right, so there's our piece. I'm going to take my glue. I like to use glue to start out instead of pins because it stays a bit better whenever I'm doing this next step. Okay, so make sure that glue stays there, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold this up. So I'm folding on the line between A2 and A1, just like that, so that you can see the fabric. The fabric is not folded, okay? And then we're going to take this and I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch away from that fold. So I'm lining this up like this, and then I'm cutting that a 1/4 inch away from the fold. After we trim it, we open this up and we get our A1 fabric. So our A1 fabric is our 5 inch by 2.5 inch, which is this one right here. So our 5 by our 2.5. We want to line this up in a way to where when we open this up, it's going to completely cover A1. So that's important. So line this up in a way it's going to completely cover A1, and you want to have right side to right side. There we are. And pin that into place. There we are. And then that one is ready to sew. So I'm going to take this one, set that aside, and let's grab our B. So our B1 is the 5.5 by 5.5, which is this one. So we're going to go wrong side to wrong side, and I did it this way so you can easily line up on here and here. So this one is a big piece. That way it's easy for you to line up the bottom and the top with this long piece. So let's center it perfectly in there. So I'm going to put a bit of glue on the center of B1 and center that right there and press that down. And then we're going to take the B2, I'm going to fold this over and crease it. And then we're going to trim a 1/4 inch away from that B2, between the B1 and the B2. Then I'm going to take this and flip this over. Now we're using our B2. So our B2 fabric is the 4 by 4.5 inch red. So let me find, is this it? The 4.5 by 4. Here we are. This is my 4 by my 4.5 inch. And then with the 4 and the 4.5 inch, we're going to take the 4 inch side and line it up. So let's take that side right there and line that up. And when you fold it over, it completely covers it. So remember, we want to test this. So your placement, you're going to put it down and then fold this over, and it should completely cover your paper. If it doesn't, move your fabric around again until it does. So let's pin this in place. And then we will move on to our C unit. There we are. And our C unit, same thing. We're going to start with our C number 1, which is the last piece of gold left. We've used all of our gold fabric. We're doing this wrong side to wrong side. So let's go ahead and put a little bit of glue in the center. And I can set my glue aside. I'm done with that for tonight. Center this up completely. There we are. Now let's fold this over. So it's folded between the C1 and the C2. And we're trimming a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Opening it back up again. Taking our C2 fabric, which, all right, with our C2, let's open this back up again. Our C2 is a 3.5 by a 2.5. And I'm going to lay this out so the 3.5 inch side lines up with the gold. So we're lining our edges up. Whenever we fold this over, it completely covers C2. So let me turn this so I can pin this in place. And there we are. I'm just making sure it's all lined up, and we're going to pin this. Now we have our base units all started for C1, C2, A1, A2, and B1, B2. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to show you on the sewing machine how to go ahead and sew this. When you're sewing this, remember, you want to lower your stitch length to 1.6. It's very important for when you take the paper out later. So we're going to go ahead and start this. We're sewing between A1 and A2. I'm starting it off of my paper, and I'm going to sew through past the line about a 1/4 inch and stopping. Because I'm starting and stopping a good distance away, I do not need to lock my stitches in. However, if locking your stitches in makes you feel better, if you feel it's more secured, by all means lock those stitches in. However, if you have at least a 1/4 inch before and after, you do not need to worry about back stitching. At least a 1/4 inch. You can actually go a little bit more. It's not a problem at all. All right, so let me do that. And then last but not least, we're going to sew between C1 and C2. And then we're going to head over to the ironing board and iron these. Now, when you iron these, I prefer to use steam in my iron. If you do decide to use steam, it will curl your paper. Just keep that in mind. Or if you use a spritzer, if you spritz your fabric, but when you iron it, it's going to curl that paper. Don't worry about it. It's not a problem. It's not going to hurt your block. It is definitely okay. So I prefer to steam. That way I know that this fabric is as flat as it possibly can be. So we're going to iron towards the ones that we added on. Do not iron towards where you did your glue basting. So iron towards the other one. And now let's add the next piece. So we're going to take, where is my A piece? We're going to take our A piece and we're going to rinse and repeat. Meaning we're going to go to our A3 and I'm going to fold that. Now, I have a little bit of a problem here because I've sewn this area right here. I'm just going to tear back this paper a bit to let it be a little bit easier to fold this. So we're folding that there, and then I'm going to trim this a 1/4 inch away from that fold. And then I'm going to get my A3 fabric, which is the 4 inch by 3 inch. And we're going to lay that down right here. And we're going to take the 4 inch side and laying the 4 inch side against that and making sure when I open this up, it completely covers the paper. Okay, so it's going to pin this. And then we're, like I said, we're going to rinse and repeat. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the camera a little bit because I'm just going to go ahead and add all of these on, sew them, iron them, come back and show you A4 and C4. Alright, our B unit is finished, so I'm going to take that and set that aside. So now we just have to worry about A4 and C4 with our last two pieces of fabric. So I'm going to take A4. Now remember what I said, we've already sewn through this area here. So I'm actually going to very slowly pull back the paper so it's easier to fold. So we're going to pull the paper back there and pull the paper back here. Now I'm holding the thread, I'm holding that seam so that the thread itself doesn't come undone. Here we are, and then all the way down. So we're folding that. I'm going to turn that and trimming this a 1/4 inch away. There we are. And then taking our long fabric, and of course I'm lining this up on the 9-inch side. If you line it up on the 4.5 inch, it's not going to fit. You're lining this up on the 9-inch side. Let's make sure if I fold this over. There we are. Okay, so let me turn this around and pin this in place. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing for the C unit. And then we're going to sew these, and I will come back, iron them, and then I'll show you how to put all of the units together. And we have our units. So once you're finished sewing all of these pieces, flip them over, and now we're going to trim them. Make sure, remember, use a rotary blade that is meant for paper. Do not use the same rotary blade as you use for your fabric. So I purposely have 2 different rotary cutters with 2 different handles just to make sure I do not mix them up. And we're going to trim along those dotted lines. So let's go ahead and trim those, and you're going to do that for all 3 of your units. So just trim around right on those dotted lines. I actually like to go a little bit outside of the dotted lines. You just don't want to go inside of the dotted lines because those are our seam allowances. So if you trim it a little bit wide, it's perfectly okay, and it's actually going to help you whenever you do your squaring up. And everything is trimmed up. So remember I said that these are the reverse. So if we're going to flip these over, you can now see your pieces. And there it is. Now that looks a little different than our finished piece here. And that's because this still has seam allowances in there, which is why this one seems a little strange. So let's go ahead and start sewing them. I'm going to take the B to the C first, just because I think it's, actually, you know what? No, let's go B to A. So here's our A unit. We're going to take our B unit and we're going to flip it over. Now, this one's a little different than some of my other patterns because, like I said at the beginning, I have this little box right here. This is to help with you lining it up. So whenever you take this, make sure as you're lining it up that your little black box is overhanging and that everything else is straight and lined up. So let's make sure that that's right there, and there we are. And then once that's lined up, I'm going to pin this in place, and I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this. Now, for this, I am going to use a leader ender. I am going to chain piece this because I want to make sure that I really secure this area in. So I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so I'm using my leader ender for chain piecing. If you haven't chain pieced before, I have a video down below that'll teach you how to do that. So I want to make sure whenever I go to sew, I'm going to go right into this little divot right here, this little thing. So I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to line that up perfectly right there, and then sew right along that black line, all the way down. And when I reach the end, I'm going to use another leader ender. So I'm going to take my scrap piece of fabric. I'm going to trim this. And I'm going to put it on the other side. Now, I should come out just at that. Yep, and I did. I should come out just at that little crevice right there, and I'll show you after I free it. So let's free this. And you see how it goes right to this edge right there. And right there. Ignore the fact that I sewed over my pins. Don't do that. It's a horrible habit that I have. And now let's iron this. So whenever we iron it, I'm going to iron these seams open. So I'm going to iron this towards the B. And then once I've got that ironed down, I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to finger press this open. Now, if this is too warm for you to do that, you can use some tools. There are some really cool widgets and toys and things that'll help you get in there to iron these open. Clover makes a lot of really cool, amazing products that you can do. And then I've got that seam ironed open. And there's our 1/2. So now let's do our other side. So we're going to take this, and we're going to flip this. No, wait, no, we're going to take this one. I was looking to see where my little things are. We're taking our C, and we're going to flip this over, and we're going to line this up so that our little tabby is hanging out there and pinning it in place. And we're doing the same exact thing that we just did. So after I finish pinning this, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew this, bring it back over here, iron it, and ironing my seams open. And then we'll take a look at our block. And there's our lightning bolt block. I actually like that one better than the initial one that I did. Alright, so now let's take out the papers. So when you're taking your papers out, don't forget, make sure that you fold it again before you start pulling these papers out. If you lowered your stitch length to 1.6, they should be a little easier to take out. So you should be able to just tear those out. If you get little pieces of paper stuck in there, you can use a pair of tweezers to get them out. My favorite tweezers are the Famore 507s because they have an angled edge and they're super sharp and they can get in there and get all of those little pieces of paper out. So I'm going to take out all of my paper and then we'll come back and do one last ironing and square this up. Alright, with our paper out, now let's re-iron these seams. So I'm going to re-iron these seams open. Let me do that one quickly. There we are. Because whenever you're taking these papers out, it's going to completely warp it so that your seams may actually close up again or have any issues. But you know what I forgot to do? I think I forgot to even iron the seam open to begin with. Well, I'm fixing that now. So you want all of your seams to be open. And then once your seams are open, then re-iron the front again without any paper in there. Because it'll be easier for lining this up and squaring this up. So let's go ahead and square this up. We're squaring this up at 6.5. Oh, mine's just a little crooked. But that's okay. And let's square this up over here. And there we are. There's my block. So hopefully those instructions helped you create your very own blocks. Now don't forget, if you want me to do the math for you for resizing your blocks, just make a comment down below. I'd be more than happy to take care of it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you liked the video. If so, please follow my YouTube, like this video, and don't forget to follow my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my Facebook group, Quite Nerdy Quilters, Pinterest, TikTok, Twitch, where I stream live, and I also stream live here on YouTube. Don't forget to check my social media posts on my Facebook and Twitter in order to see when I'm live. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.